Penalties against possession of a drug should not be more damaging to an individual than the use of the drug itself.
That was Jimmy Carter. Speaking to Congress in 1977, he was calling for the decriminalization of small amounts of cannabis, up to 1 ounce. It sounded like the beginning of a ceasefire in America's decades-long drug war. But by the end of his presidency, that ceasefire had collapsed. And what came next would be an all-out crusade during the era of war.
And I was like, yeah, it's going to be called the Eras Tour. See you there.
Welcome back to the Dazed and Confused podcast, where we trace the tangled history of cannabis in America. I'm your host, Christian Maynard, doctoral candidate with Washington State University in sociology.
Go Cougs! Yeah, go Cougs!
Today, we're moving from Carter's short-lived push for reform to Reagan's full-throttle escalation of the war on drugs. We'll talk about Paraquat poisoning, cannabis on the White House roof, the reemergence of medical marijuana, and how the 1980s brought the drug wars to the American classrooms. In 1977, Carter made a bold statement for the time.
I support legislation amending federal law to eliminate all federal criminal penalties for the possession of up to 1 ounce of marijuana. This decriminalization is not legalization. It means only that the federal penalty for possession would be reduced and a person would receive a fine rather than a criminal penalty. Federal penalties for trafficking would remain in force and the states would remain free to adopt whatever laws they wish concerning the marijuana smoker.
He framed it carefully. No change to trafficking laws, no interference with state decisions, just a reduced penalty, a fine, not a criminal record. But Carter's administration faced a major controversy, not from Congress, but from south of the border, as discussed in the previous episode and revealed more during the Carter administration.
Agents participated in the torture. Anybody, it didn't matter a shit who it was. They would actually participate in the torture of these goddamn people. I got caught up in a goddamn gunfight there myself and killed men. Now we were running into this kind of stuff constantly, all the time.
The U.S. was helping Mexico spray Paraquat, a toxic herbicide, on cannabis fields. Carter claimed,
American money is not used to purchase the Paraquat.
And he said that he strongly supported the program. Meanwhile, at the White House, cannabis wasn't just a policy issue. In 1977, country star Willie Nelson and Chip Carter, the president's son, had smoked cannabis on the roof of the White House.
When I first met Jimmy, first thing he did was quote my songs back to me.
Bob Dylan has been one of my best friends, along with Willie Nelson. When Willie Nelson wrote his autobiography, he confessed that he smoked pot in the White House, and he says that his companion was one of the servants at the White House. Actually, was one of my sons.
Another son, Jack, had been dismissed from the Navy for cannabis use, and First Lady Rosalind Carter confirmed that yet another son, Jeff, had also tried it, while Carter struggled to move federal law. A legal battle reintroduced cannabis as medicine. In U.S. v. Randall, 1976, Robert Randall, a glaucoma patient facing blindness, convinced the courts that cannabis was the only effective treatment for his condition.
The defendant's interest in retaining his sight outweighs the government's interest.
As a result of this lawsuit, by 1979, Carter had created the Compassionate Investigational New Drug program, allowing the University of Mississippi to grow and supply cannabis to select patients. Randall himself reportedly smoked up to 70 joints a week to control for eye pressure. He also helped other patients qualify for the program. But the program was small. Only about 30 people ever qualified, and patients routinely said that the government's cannabis was low quality compared to the streets. Individuals would receive a tin shown here. A couple of states also took some actions. New Mexico launched a limited medical research program in 1978. Virginia allowed doctors to recommend cannabis for cancer and glaucoma in 1979. Then came 1981 and a new president.
Leading medical researchers are coming to the conclusion that marijuana, pot, grass, whatever you want to call it, is probably the most dangerous drug in the United States, and we haven't begun to find out all of the ill effects, but they are permanent ill effects.
Reagan offered no evidence but claimed he had
absolute proof that smoking even one marijuana cigarette is equal in brain damage to being on Bikini Island during an H-bomb blast.
From the start, his administration expanded eradication efforts. By 1983, the DEA and California authorities had launched CAMP, the Campaign Against Marijuana Planting, targeting Northern California's Emerald Triangle. Residents complained about helicopters buzzing, with one report of a horse being spooked to death. By 1985, 50 states were part of the federal eradication program. By 1985, all states were part of this program. Reagan's war on drugs wasn't just fought in fields and courtrooms, it entered American schools. In Los Angeles, police and educators created D.A.R.E, the Drug Abuse Resistance Education Program, in 1983, later renamed in 2009 to the Keeping It Real program. It taught kids from preschool to high school about the dangers of drugs, with officers as guest lecturers. One brief interruption. I personally know someone who rolled up their D.A.R.E program certificate into a joint and smoked it. Don't smoke paper. It's not healthy. In 1986, Congress gave D.A.R.E federal funding, and soon 3/4 of U.S. school districts were on board. In 1986, Nancy and Ronald Reagan addressed the nation, claiming,
With us working together as a nation united, now we need your support again. Drugs are menacing our society. They're threatening our values and undercutting our institutions. They're killing our children. And by next year, our spending for drug law enforcement will have more than tripled from its 1981 levels. We have increased seizures of illegal drugs. Shortages of marijuana are now being reported.
First Lady Nancy Reagan toured the country with her Just Say No campaign, telling kids that they had the power to resist drugs. By 1988, over 12,000 Just Say No clubs existed.
For the sake of our children, I implore each of you to be unyielding and inflexible in your opposition to drugs. Our young people are helping us lead the way. Not long ago in Oakland, California, I was asked by a group of children what to do if they were offered drugs. And I answered, just say no. Soon after that, those children in Oakland formed a Just Say No club. And now there are over 10,000 such clubs all over the country. Well, their participation and their courage in saying no needs our encouragement. We can help by using every opportunity to force the issue of not using drugs to the point of making others uncomfortable, even if it meaning making ourselves unpopular. Our job is never easy because drug criminals are ingenious. They work every day to plot a new and better way to steal our children's lives.
Oh, hello there. I didn't see you. I was just teaching Mr. Cookie how to fly. If you're enjoying the Dazed and Confused podcast, you can keep it going for just $4.20 a month on Patreon. It keeps the research flying, and it helps me afford his millet. Meanwhile, Reagan's 1984 Comprehensive Crime Control Act gave local police and federal agencies the right to keep properties seized in drug cases, from cars to cash, creating a powerful incentive to focus on drug arrests. In 1989, Attorney General Richard Thornburg remarked,
"It's now possible for a drug dealer to serve time in a forfeiture-financed prison after being arrested by agents driving a forfeiture-provided automobile while working in a forfeiture-funded sting operation."
Reagan also nominated Douglas Ginsburg to the Supreme Court, but Ginsburg admitted to trying cannabis on several occasions throughout the 60s and 70s, clarifying,
"Marijuana was the only drug I ever used. I have not used it since. It was a mistake and I regret it."
Following public controversy, his nomination was withdrawn. Remember NORML's petition to delist or reschedule cannabis discussed in the previous episode? In 1988, DEA Judge Francis Young concluded that cannabis was
marijuana in its natural form is one of the safest therapeutically active substances known to man. It would be unreasonable, arbitrary, and capricious for DEA to continue to stand between those sufferers and the benefits of this substance.
And he urged that be made available to patients. However, DEA Administrator John Law rejected the recommendation, accusing Young of ignoring credible scientific evidence.
Young ignored the scientific evidence, ignored the testimony of highly credible and recognized medical experts, and instead relied on the testimony of psychiatrists and individuals who used marijuana.
And yet, outside of Washington, some surprising voices called for the legalization of all drugs. In 1990, real estate developer Donald Trump voiced support.
We're losing badly the war on drugs. You have to legalize drugs to win that war. You have to take the profit away from these drug czars.
Reagan's war on drugs marked an escalation, with his predecessor George H.W. Bush maintaining many of those punitive cannabis policies. In 1989, Bush appointed William Bennett as the first director of the Office of National Drug Control Policy. So what was Bennett's take on cannabis?
Why in God's name foster the use of a drug that makes you stupid?
That year, the administration launched Operation Green Merchant, targeting specialty gardening stores. Federal agents collected customer records, then raided homes based on the purchases of legal equipment. Over 400 people were arrested as part of these raids. In 1990, Congress passed the Solomon-Lautenberg Amendment, better known as the Smoke a Joint, Lose Your License law. States had a choice: suspend driver's licenses for drug offenses, even if the individual did not own or operate a vehicle at the time of the drug offense, or states faced the possibility of losing federal highway funds. By 1994, 19 states had adopted the suspension policy, now 3. Bush also restricted the federal Investigational New Drug program, which allowed a small number of patients to legally use medical cannabis. Amid a surge of applications, especially from people living with AIDS, the administration stopped accepting new participants.
If the Public Health Service is going around giving marijuana to folks, there would be a perception that this stuff can't be so bad.
Cannabis use as a political litmus test showed signs of weakening when Supreme Court nominee Clarence Thomas.
I would like to start by saying unequivocally, uncategorically, that I deny each and every single allegation against me today. And from my standpoint, as a Black American, as far as I'm concerned, it is a high-tech lynching.
Admitted he'd used cannabis in college and perhaps once in law school. The administration dismissed it as non-consequential, along with many other scandals.
His conversations were very vivid. He spoke about acts that he had seen in pornographic films involving such matters as women having sex with animals and films showing group sex or rape scenes. He talked about pornographic materials depicting individuals with large penises or large breasts involved in various sex acts. On several occasions, Thomas told me graphically of his own sexual prowess. Because I was extremely uncomfortable talking about sex with him at all, and particularly in such a graphic way, I told him that I did not want to talk about these subjects.
Officials acknowledged that rejecting nominees based on their past use could, in their words, disqualify a whole generation. Jimmy Carter's presidency showed a brief opening for cannabis reform, but Reagan's tenure resulted in a setback for the pro-legalization movement. By the early 90s, the anti-cannabis machinery expanded on by Reagan was firmly entrenched. Asset forfeiture, D.A.R.E, Just Say No, these weren't just laws, they were cultural campaigns, especially aimed at the youth, and they kept cannabis criminalization and its stigma deeply woven in American life. In our next episode, we'll shift from politics to the research front, exploring the major studies on cannabis that emerged throughout the era of war and what they revealed about the plant and its place in American society. That's it for this episode of the Dazed and Confused podcast. If you enjoyed the show and want to help keep independent research and storytelling alive, consider joining my Patreon. It's just $4.20 a month. That's less than a fancy coffee and way more satisfying. Your support helps me dig through archives, unearth forgotten stories, and bring you the tangled history of cannabis in America. You'll find the link in the description below. Thanks for listening, and remember, stay curious, stay critical, and perhaps stay a little dazed. So first you want to flutter your wings, then you want to fly. So you separate your wings, you get your wings, you start flapping them around, And then you need confidence. You need to have confidence when you fly.